Number 10. The Weeping Woman of Lawang. Imagine a building so vast it's said to have 1,000 doors. Its name, Lawang, literally means 1,000 doors in Javanese. Located in Semarang, Indonesia. This colossal structure was once the grand headquarters of the Dutch East Indies Railway Company. Its stained glass windows and sweeping European architecture speak of a colonial past filled with power and wealth. But beneath the beauty, Lawang holds a history stained with blood and suffering, a history that refuses to stay buried. When night falls, the endless, silent corridors are said to come alive with echoes of the past. And among them, one sound is more feared than any other, the sound of a woman weeping in the dark. The stories began with the night guards, men paid to patrol the labyrinthian halls and cavernous basements. They were the first to hear it, a soft, mournful sobbing that seemed to drift from everywhere and nowhere at once. It would start as a faint whimper carried on the humid night air, just loud enough to make you question if you'd heard anything at all. But it would grow, becoming a sound of pure, inconsolable grief that could chill a person to the bone. Many guards tried to find the source. They would follow the sound down one dark corridor, only for it to fade and reappear behind them. It was a phantom game of cat and mouse, and the weeping was always one step ahead. One night, a seasoned guard, bolder than the rest, was determined to put an end to the mystery. The crying was louder than he had ever heard it, echoing from the building's notoriously haunted basement. The air grew heavy and cold as he descended the stone steps, his flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the oppressive darkness. The basement had been used as a makeshift prison and torture chamber by Japanese forces during World War II. The walls themselves seemed to hold the screams of the past. The sobbing was close now, coming from just around the corner. He took a deep breath, gripped his light, and peered into the shadows. There she was. A woman dressed in a traditional white kabaya stood with her back to him. Her long, dark hair cascaded down, obscuring her face as her shoulders shook with violent sobs. A wave of pity washed over the guard, momentarily overriding his fear. He called out, asking if she was all right, if she needed help. The moment his voice cut through the air, the crying stopped. An unnerving silence fell over the basement, thick and suffocating. Then, with an unnatural slowness, her head began to turn. It kept turning and turning, far beyond the limits of any human neck, until her face was staring directly at him. Upside down over her own shoulder. Her eyes were black, empty voids, and her mouth was stretched into a silent, agonized scream. He didn't even remember running. He just found himself outside, gasping for air, and he never returned to the night shift. This weeping woman is believed to be the spirit of a Dutch lady who took her own life in the building, heartbroken and lost. But she is not the only spirit said to haunt Lawang. The basement is also home to a Kuntilanak, a terrifying vampiric ghost from Indonesian folklore, often drawn to the scent of blood and despair. Visitors and paranormal investigators who have braved the building after dark have reported sudden drops in temperature, disembodied voices whispering in their ears, and the chilling sensation of being watched or even touched by unseen hands. Some have captured photos of shadowy figures and pale faces peering from the countless doorways. The building's reputation became so infamous that it was featured on an Asian paranormal reality show. where the crew was so tormented by spectral activity that they fled in terror. Sui is not just a building, it's a vortex of tragic energy, a place where the veil between worlds is terrifyingly thin, and that was only the beginning, because Indonesia's hauntings get much darker. Number 9. The Haunting of Beringin Kurung, a cursed banyan tree said to trap wandering spirits within its tangled roots. They call it Beringin Kurung, the confined banyan, and it doesn't just stand in a forest, it commands it. Found in the heart of Java, its sprawling canopy blots out the sun, casting a permanent twilight on the ground below. Its aerial roots hang down like skeletal fingers, reaching, always reaching, for the earth. Locals whisper that this isn't just a tree, it's a prison, a gateway between our world and the next, guarded by ancient unseen entities. They say the air around it is colder, the silence deeper, and that the tree itself hums with a malevolent energy, feeding on the fear of those who dare approach. For generations, it has been the subject of a terrifying dare, a test of courage passed down among the youth of nearby villages. The challenge sounds simple. Walk around the massive trunk 7 times at the stroke of midnight. But the elders warn against it. They know that each circle is a step deeper into the spirit world, a gamble with your own soul. The first circle is an invitation. The second is an acknowledgement. By the third, the tree knows your name. One humid night, a group of 4 teenagers, fueled by bravado and skepticism, decided to accept the challenge. Armed with nothing but a single flickering flashlight, they made their way to the clearing where the great banyan stood. Its presence was even more immense and menacing in the dark. The dare began. On the first circle, they laughed, their nervous chuckles swallowed by the oppressive silence. On the second, the flashlight beam began to stutter, casting dancing, distorted shadows that looked almost human. On the third, a sudden gust of wind tore through the clearing, though not a single leaf on any other tree stirred. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something sweet and cloying like funeral flowers. On the 4th circle, the boy at the back of the group, Adi, let out a choked gasp. He swore he felt something brush against the back of his neck, cold and wet like a dead leaf. But when he spun around, there was nothing there. Just the impenetrable darkness between the hanging roots. On the 5th circle, another of them, Sari, felt a cold, impossibly strong hand grip her wrist. She screamed and tried to pull away, but the grip tightened like a vice. Her friends stopped, their own fear paralyzing them, as she stared at her arm, at the empty space where the invisible fingers were digging into her skin. Panic set in. They wanted to run, but they were already on the 6th circle. That's when the whispers started. They weren't coming from the surrounding forest, but from inside the trunk itself. Faint, layered voices murmuring in an old dialect, calling out forgotten names. Through the cacophony, they could distinguish one sound clearly, a soft, sorrowful weeping that seemed to emanate from the very wood of the tree. The weeping grew louder, more desperate, and then it was joined by a sound that froze the blood in their veins, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the soles of their shoes. They had 1 circle left. They had to finish. The boy in the lead, Booty, took a hesitant step to begin the 7th lap, but his friend, who was supposed to be right behind him, was gone. He had simply vanished into the darkness between one step and the next. There was no sound, no struggle, just an empty space where a person had been. They screamed his name into the night, their voices cracking with terror, and then they heard him answer. His call was faint, muffled, and it was coming from underneath their feet, from deep within the tangled roots of the earth. He was found the next morning, curled up asleep at the base of the tree. His clothes were torn, and his fingernails were broken and filled with dirt like he'd been clawing his way out of his own grave. He remembered nothing after the fifth circle, only a suffocating darkness and the feeling of being pulled down into the cold, unforgiving soil. The red marks on Sari's wrist took weeks to fade, perfect imprints of a hand that was never there. They never spoke of what happened, but the haunted look in their eyes told a story the village already knew. The Beringin Kurung had claimed another visitor. It had let them go this time, but the tree is patient. It has all the time in the world. Still with me. Because the forests of Indonesia hide even older, more patient secrets. Number 8. The Shadow in the Rice Fields, Sawah, Kelabu. In the sprawling, isolated rice paddies of rural Indonesia, a suffocating silence falls when the sun bleeds below the horizon. The vibrant green fields, a symbol of life by day, transform into a labyrinth of shadows at night. It is in this eerie landscape that Sawah Kelabu, the gray fields, earns its name. Many villagers claim something moves between the tall stalks after dusk, a presence that is felt long before it is seen. They warn newcomers and restless youths. The paddies belong to the living only when the sun is high. Imagine walking the narrow, muddy path that cuts through the endless sea of rice. The air is thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of wet earth and decay. The only sounds are the chorus of nocturnal insects and the squelch of your own feet. Then a new sound joins the symphony of faint, rhythmic rustling that doesn't match your pace. You stop, and the sound stops with you. Your heart hammers against your ribs. It's just the wind, you tell yourself, but there is no wind. The air is unnervingly still. A farmer, let's call him Booty, experienced this firsthand. He was walking home late one evening, his torch beam cutting a nervous path ahead. He saw a shadow pacing him from inside the field. No matter how slow or fast he moved, it stayed beside him long, thin, and completely silent. It wasn't his own shadow. His was cast behind him by his light. This one moved parallel, a sliver of impossible darkness against the moon-washed stalks. When he stopped, it stopped. When he ran, it slid through the rice like liquid darkness, a silent predator keeping pace with its prey. Panic seized him. Buddy's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted, his sandals slapping against the mud. The village lights were a distant, taunting promise of safety. He didn't dare look directly at the shadow, but he could feel its oppressive presence, a cold spot in the warm night air. It felt ancient, hungry, and utterly devoid of anything resembling a soul. The rustling grew louder, closer, no longer trying to be subtle. It was a chase now. When he finally reached the village lights, stumbling into the halo of a single street lamp, the shadow stepped out from the edge of the rice field. It was not a man. It was not an animal. It revealed a towering figure made only of black smoke, a form that twisted and writhed as if in silent agony. It had no face, no eyes, yet Booty felt its gaze pierce right through him. The figure leaned toward him, its smoky tendrils stretching across the ground, and whispered in a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping against stone, "Don't walk alone again." With that final, chilling warning, it dissolved back into the darkness of the fields, leaving Booty trembling and forever changed. But what is this entity? Elders speak of it as a Penungu, a guardian spirit of the land, angered by those who disrespect its domain. They say it is the accumulated sorrow of generations of farmers who toiled and died in those very fields, their spirits now bound to the soil. Others believe it is a jinn, a malevolent being that preys on fear, drawing strength from the terror of those who wander into its territory after dark. It doesn't always just warn people. There are hushed tales of individuals who vanished without a trace, their last known whereabouts being a lonely path through the Sawah Kelabu. All that was ever found were their footprints, ending abruptly at the edge of the rice. The most terrifying accounts come from those who tried to confront the shadow. A group of teenagers, emboldened by youthful arrogance, once dared to venture into the fields at midnight, hoping to capture proof of the legend. They carried cameras and powerful flashlights, laughing and shouting to mask their fear. At first, nothing happened, but as they went deeper, a profound silence fell. Their flashlights began to flicker and die, one by one. Plunged into near-total darkness, they heard Italo growl that seemed to come from all directions at once. Then, the shadows around them began to move, rising up from the ground, dozens of them, tall and thin, closing in from every side. The teenagers scattered in blind terror, and only one made it back to the village before dawn, babbling incoherently about eyes in the dark and hands made of smoke. The others were never seen again. The Sawah Kelabu serves as a stark reminder that some places hold secrets that are not meant to be uncovered. It's a place where the veil between our world and another is terrifyingly thin, and where a simple walk home can become a desperate fight for survival. The shadow in the rice fields is more than just a ghost story. It is a living nightmare woven into the very fabric of the land. But shadows aren't the only things watching. Number 7. The Mirror Demon of Bandung Dormitory. A tale that spread like wildfire among the university dorms of West Java. It starts, as these stories often do, with a whisper, a rumor passed between late-night study sessions and hushed conversations in dimly lit hallways. In a particular women's dormitory in Bandung, a place known for its colonial-era architecture and lingering shadows, there was a mirror. It wasn't ornate or special, just a simple, full-length mirror fixed to the wall of a third-floor common room. But this mirror had a schedule. Students said the mirrors fogged up at exactly 3:03 a.m., no matter the temperature. It defied logic. Even on the coldest mountain nights, when breath would turn to mist, the other mirrors in the building remained perfectly clear. But this one, without fail, would cloud over with a strange, internal condensation, as if something were breathing on it from the other side. Most girls were too terrified to go near it after midnight, avoiding the common room altogether. But curiosity, as we know, is a powerful and often dangerous thing. One girl, a skeptical and headstrong student named Anissa, decided she'd had enough of the ghost stories. She wagered with her friends that she could not only stay up to witness the phenomenon, but that she would prove it was just a prank or a strange quirk of the old building. Armed with a flashlight and her phone to record the proof. She settled into a worn-out armchair facing the mirror just before the witching hour approached. The dorm fell silent. The usual sounds of the city faded into a low hum. Anissa watched the clock on her phone tick past 3 a.m., then 3:01, 3:02. Her heart began to beat a little faster, a traitorous drum against her ribs. Then it happened. Right at 3:03 a.m., a milky white fog began to bloom from the center of the mirror, spreading outwards like a stain. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with an unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Anissa held her breath, her phone shaking slightly in her hand. This was it. The fog was so dense she could no longer see her own reflection. As she leaned in closer, a new, terrifying detail emerged. The condensation wasn't just random. It seemed to be forming letters, slowly, deliberately, as if an invisible finger were tracing them from within the glass. The words appeared in the fog. "I see you." A knot of pure ice formed in Anissa's stomach. This was no prank. Her bravado evaporated, replaced by a primal fear. She reached out a trembling hand, her rational mind screaming to wipe away the terrifying message, to make it disappear. But as her fingertips brushed against the cold surface of the glass, she saw it, a movement from within the fog. It was another hand, pale and thin, reaching out from the inside of the mirror, its movements perfectly mirroring her own. She could see the faint outline of its knuckles, the ghastly white of its fingernails. Then, the hand on the other side stopped mirroring her. It flattened itself against the inside of the glass, directly opposite her own palm, as if trying to touch her through the barrier. Anissa's scream was a raw, piercing shriek of absolute terror that ripped through the silence of the night, a sound that woke the entire dorm. Her friends were the first to burst into the room. They found her unconscious on the floor, crumpled in a heap before the mirror. The air was still frigid. The cryptic message had vanished, but the mirror was cracked, a spiderweb of fractures spreading from a single point in the center. And there, on the inside of the glass, perfectly preserved where the crack began, was a single, clear, and unexplainable fingerprint. Anissa was never the same. She left the university the following week, refusing to ever look at her own reflection again. The mirror was removed, but the legend remains, a chilling warning to all who live within those walls. From the haunted dorms of the city, we head deep into the ancient, sacred mountains of Bali. Number 6. The Spirit Bride of Mount Salak. Countless hikers have claimed to see her. Mount Salak, a name that echoes with a sinister reputation among even the most seasoned Indonesian climbers. It's not the treacherous terrain or the unpredictable weather that gives them pause. It's the stories, whispers of hikers vanishing without a trace, of disembodied voices carried on the wind, and of a spectral woman who wanders its misty slopes, forever searching for a wedding that will never come. They call her the Spirit Bride. The mountain itself is an enigma, an ancient volcano shrouded in dense, often impenetrable fog. Its name, Salak, has a dual meaning. In modern Indonesian, it means salak, fruit, but in Old Sundanese, it means silver. This duality reflects the mountain's nature, a place of natural beauty hiding a core of chilling mystery. It's a place where the veil between our world and the next is said to be terrifyingly thin. Locals warn against arrogance and disrespect on its trails, for the mountain's guardians are always watching. The most famous account, the one that cemented the spirit bride into legend, involves a young hiker named Addy. In the late 90s, Addy and his friends decided to conquer Salak's peak. They were young, confident, and perhaps a little too dismissive of the local warnings. Deep into their trek, as the afternoon sun began to wane, an unnaturally thick fog rolled in, swallowing the landscape and separating Addy from his group. He called out their names, but only the muffled silence of the forest answered. Panic began to set in. As he stumbled through the undergrowth, a figure emerged from the mist. It was a woman, dressed in a pristine white wedding gown, her face obscured by a delicate veil. She was waving at him, a silent, desperate plea for help. Thinking she was another lost tourist, perhaps part of a pre-wedding photo shoot gone wrong, Addy rushed towards her. "Are you okay?" he shouted. She didn't answer, but simply turned and began to move deeper into the woods, beckoning him to follow. Relief washed over Addy. At least he wasn't alone. But every time he blinked, she appeared farther away, floating instead of walking. Her feet never seemed to touch the moss-covered ground. The forest grew darker, the trees more gnarled and twisted, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for him. The air grew cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something sickly sweet, like decaying flowers. He called out again, his voice trembling. "Wait, please, wait for me." Finally, she stopped, her back still to him, standing at the very edge of what looked like a deep, dark ravine. Addy caught up, breathless, and reached out to touch her shoulder. "I think we're lost," he stammered. Slowly, she turned. With a ghostly, deliberate motion, she lifted her veil. Addy's scream was swallowed by the fog. The face he saw was not that of a beautiful bride. It was a canvas of horror, a decaying visage covered in soil and writhing worms. Her eyes were hollow, black pits of despair, and from her lipless mouth came a silent, agonizing wail. His group found him hours later, huddled at the base of an ancient banyan tree, staring at a cliff edge, still reaching toward someone only he could see. He was muttering the same word over and over. The bride, the bride. He was physically unharmed, but his mind was shattered, forever haunted by the decaying face in the mist. Who is she? Some say she was a woman who died in a tragic accident on the way to her wedding. Others believe she is a much older, more malevolent entity, a nature spirit, who preys on those who disrespect the mountain. Whatever her origin, her legend serves as a chilling reminder. On Mount Salak, you are never truly alone. And now, into the waters where the dead don't always rest. Number 5. The Drowning Hand of Situ, Bagendit, a serene lake with a dark secret, one known for dragging unsuspecting swimmers down into its murky depths. For centuries, the calm surface of Situ Bagendit has hidden a terrifying legend, a story whispered in hushed tones by the locals who live in its shadow. They warn outsiders to stay away from the water's edge, especially after dusk, for this is not a place of peaceful recreation. It is a hunting ground. A wealthy but cruel woman who once owned all the land surrounding the lake. She was consumed by greed, hoarding her riches while the villagers around her starved. One fateful day, a mysterious old man came to her, begging for a sip of water. She cruelly refused, mocking his poverty and casting him out. In that moment, the old man revealed his true power. He struck his walking stick into the ground, and from the hole, water began to gush out, an unstoppable torrent that would soon swallow the entire village. As the floodwaters rose, swallowing her vast mansion and all her hoarded gold, Bagendit tried to flee. But her own greed became her anchor. Weighed down by the heavy jewelry she refused to abandon, she was pulled under the churning water. They say her spirit never left. Trapped at the bottom of the very lake her wickedness created, she now waits, her soul twisted by centuries of bitterness and an insatiable jealousy for the living. Many have learned this lesson the hard way. Imagine this: a young fisherman named Yu Jung is out on the lake in the late afternoon. The sky is turning a bruised purple, and the usual chorus of insects has fallen silent. Everything is still, too still. That's when he sees it. A pale, almost translucent hand breaking the surface of the water, its fingers beckoning, waving weakly as if asking for help. Thinking someone is drowning, Yu Jung's first instinct is to help. He rows his small wooden boat forward, calling out, his voice echoing unnervingly across the silent water. But as he gets closer, a chilling wrongness settles over him. The hand doesn't belong to a struggling person. It rises higher, the arm attached to it stretching impossibly long, like rubber, reaching far beyond the limits of any human limb. Panic seizes him. Before he can even react, the hand, cold as the grave, slaps down and grabs the edge of his boat, the grip unnaturally strong. The wood groans under the pressure. Suddenly, the water around him begins to churn and boil, not from heat, but from a frantic, unseen motion below. Dozens more hands, pale and ghostly, erupt from the depths. They claw at the sides of his boat, their long, jagged fingernails scraping and scratching at the wood, a sound like 100 rats trying to claw their way out of a trap. The air fills with a low, gurgling moan, the sound of someone drowning, a sound that seems to come from all directions at once. Yu Jung is paralyzed by terror, staring into the dark water where faint, screaming faces seem to swirl just beneath the surface. These are the spirits of Bagendit's other victims, souls she has dragged down to join her in her watery prison. They are her army, her eternally drowning slaves. With a final surge of adrenaline, Yu Jung grabs his paddle and shoves away from the grasping hands with all his might. He paddles backward with frantic, desperate strokes, not daring to look behind him. The horrifying sound of splintering wood and scratching nails follows him all the way to the shore. When he finally stumbles out of his boat onto solid ground, trembling and gasping for air, he sees the evidence of his encounter. Deep, gouging scratch marks are etched into the side of the boat, a permanent reminder of the hands that tried to pull him under. He never went back on the lake again. The locals say the hand is always waiting, searching for its next victim to drag down into the cold, silent darkness. Next, we enter one of Indonesia's darkest villages. Number 4. The Cursed House of Desa Penari. Inspired by the viral KKND Desa Penari. The story you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. It began as a whisper, a simple thread on a social media platform, posted by an anonymous user who called themselves Simple Man. But What started as a few paragraphs of text soon spiraled into a national obsession, a terrifying account that has been viewed over 15 million times. It's a story of good intentions gone horribly wrong, of ancient rules broken, and of a price that had to be paid in blood and sanity. It all started with 6 university students assigned to a community service program known in Indonesia as KKN. Their destination was a remote village nestled deep within the densest part of a Javanese jungle, a place so isolated it felt like stepping back in time. The locals called it Desa Penari, the village of the dancer. The name itself should have been a warning. From the moment they arrived, something felt deeply wrong. The air was heavy, thick with an unspoken dread. The village elders warned them, their voices low and serious, laying down 2 simple but unbreakable rules. First, they were forbidden from crossing the forbidden gate that led deeper into the jungle. Second, under no circumstances were they to complain or speak ill of the village, no matter what they saw or heard. Simple rules for simple students, or so they thought. The group was split into 2 houses. The girls, Ayu and Nur, stayed in one, while the boys, Bima and Wayu, stayed in another, along with 2 others. Nur was devoutly religious and sensitive to the unseen world. Almost immediately, she felt a suffocating presence. She would be praying in her room, only to feel cold breath on the back of her neck, hearing faint, sibilant whispers just at the edge of her hearing, like a snake slithering through dry leaves. She tried to warn the others, telling them this village was not empty, that they were being watched by something ancient and territorial. They laughed it off as superstition, but then came the music. Late one night, as the jungle hummed with the sounds of insects, a new sound drifted through the humid air, the distant ethereal melody of a gamelan. It was hypnotic, a rhythmic clanging of gongs and chimes that seemed to pull at their very souls. It always started just after midnight, a phantom orchestra playing for an unseen audience. One of the students, Bima, grew strangely obsessed. He became withdrawn, his eyes distant. The others would find him staring blankly towards the forbidden gate, as if listening to a call only he could hear. Unbeknownst to them, Bima had fallen under a spell. He had secretly crossed the forbidden boundary, drawn by the music and the vision. He couldn't resist the beautiful dancer in a green kabaya. Her movements fluid and seductive. She was Badarawi, the spirit guardian of the village, a supernatural entity who ruled the forest. She had chosen him, Ayu, to begin to change. She became reckless, openly mocking the village customs and complaining about their living conditions. One evening, she followed the sound of the gamelan, her curiosity overpowering her fear. She walked deeper and deeper into the forest until she reached a clearing bathed in eerie moonlight. There, she saw her, a dancer in a shimmering green kabaya, performing an ancient, sacred dance all alone. The dancer's movements were graceful, yet unsettling, her limbs bending in ways that weren't quite human. Ayu was mesmerized. But when she blinked, the dancer was suddenly inches from her face, smiling too wide, her eyes black and completely empty. A cold, serpentine voice whispered directly into her mind, a voice that felt like it was slithering inside her skull. "You shouldn't look at me." Ayu fainted. She woke up at sunrise, lying at the edge of the forest clearing, covered in scratches and dark, ugly bruises, shaped like fingers clamped tightly around her arms and neck. She couldn't remember what happened, but the terror was seared into her soul. She had broken the rules, and so had Bhima. They had defiled the sanctity of the village, one with her disrespect, the other with forbidden lust. The spirits demanded payment. Their health began to deteriorate rapidly. Bhima was consumed by a fever that no medicine could touch, writhing in his bed, whispering the dancer's name. Ayu began to move like a puppet, her body contorting into the unnatural poses of the dance she had witnessed. The local shaman was called, but it was too late. He declared that their souls were already forfeit, trapped in the spirit world to serve Badarawi for eternity. Ayu was cursed to become the new dancer, forced to entertain the spirits of the forest forever. Bhima was to become her eternal partner, a spectral groom for a ghostly bride. The surviving students fled the village in terror, leaving their friends to their horrifying fate. The story of what happened in Desa, Penari serves as a chilling reminder that there are places in this world where old rules still matter, and where the veil between our world and the next is terrifyingly thin. They say, if you travel deep enough into the jungles of Java and listen closely at midnight, you can still hear the faint, haunting melody of a gamelan. It is the sound of Ayu, still dancing for an audience of spirits, forever paying for her mistake. And now, the spirits move much closer to home. Number 3. The Crying Baby of Kalimantan. Not every baby's cry means someone needs help, and sometimes what sounds like a helpless infant is a lure for something far more sinister. The deep, ancient rainforests of Kalimantan, the Indonesian part of Borneo, are a world unto themselves. They are dense, humid, and teeming with life, much of it still unknown to modern science. For the loggers and indigenous Dayak people who live on the fringes of this emerald labyrinth, the forest is not just a place of resources. It's a realm of spirits, a place where the veil between our world and the next is dangerously thin. They know the rules, they respect the boundaries, and most importantly, they know which sounds to ignore. One of the most terrifying sounds you can hear echoing through the suffocating humidity of the jungle is the cry of a baby. It's a sound biologically engineered to trigger a response in us. A desperate, wailing shriek that pulls at your heartstrings and ignites a primal urge to help. But in Kalimantan, experienced locals will tell you to cover your ears, turn your back, and walk away as fast as you can. They know that this is no human child. The legend speaks of a creature known as the Anakonak, or sometimes simply the crying baby. The stories all start the same way. A lone traveler, or more commonly, a logger working late, finds himself deep in the woods as dusk begins to bleed through the canopy. That's when the sound begins. Faint at first, carried on the breeze, but unmistakable. The sound of an infant crying in distress. Imagine being that person. You're alone, surrounded by the cacophony of the jungle at night. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sets your nerves on edge, and then you hear it, a baby. Your mind races. Who would abandon a child out here? Did they fall? Are they hurt? The thought of leaving an innocent baby to the mercy of the jungle is unbearable. Against your better judgment, you decide you have to find it. You call out, trying to soothe the unseen child, and plunge deeper into the suffocating darkness following the cries. This is your first mistake. One well-known account comes from a young logger named Booty. He was part of a team clearing a remote section of forest, and one evening, he stayed behind to finish loading a truck. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the crying started. It was piercing, filled with a pain that felt chillingly real. Booty, new to the area and unfamiliar with the local warnings, grabbed his flashlight and machete and headed toward the sound. He thought a child from a nearby village might have wandered off and gotten lost. The crying seemed to move. Every time he felt he was getting closer, the sound would shift, echoing from a new direction. He pushed through thick undergrowth, thorns tearing at his clothes and skin, calling out, "I'm coming, don't worry." The jungle grew darker, the air thicker. The sound led him in what felt like circles, a disorienting dance through the ancient trees. He was getting frustrated, and a cold knot of dread was tightening in his stomach. The crying was becoming more frantic, more desperate. Finally, he stopped, exhausted and drenched in sweat, leaning against a massive ironwood tree to catch his breath. The crying suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. The usual jungle sounds, the insects, the frogs, the distant calls of night birds had all fallen quiet. The forest was holding its breath, and so was Booty. It was in that dead silence that he realized the crying hadn't stopped. It had just gotten very, very close. So close, in fact, that it was coming from right above his head. His blood ran cold. He tilted his head back, his flashlight beam cutting a shaky path up the enormous tree trunk. And there it was. Clinging to the bark like a grotesque spider was a creature. It was small, no bigger than a toddler, with pale, almost translucent skin. It had long, spindly limbs that ended in wicked-looking claws, digging into the wood. But it was the head that broke his sanity. It was disproportionately large, and its mouth was a gaping black slit that stretched from ear to ear, wide open in a silent scream. From this horrific maw had come the perfect imitation of a crying child. Before Booty could even scream, the baby let go. It didn't fall. It dropped, landing on the leafy ground behind him without making a single sound. He didn't dare turn around. He just ran. He ran faster than he ever had in his life. Not looking back, the image of that monstrous mouth burned into his mind. He could hear it scrambling behind him, its claws scraping on roots and rock, keeping pace with him effortlessly. He burst out of the tree line and back into the clearing of the logging camp, screaming for his life, and finally collapsed in front of his shocked co-workers. They knew immediately what he had seen. He was one of the lucky ones. Many who follow the cries are never seen again. The creature is said to be a guardian of the forest, or perhaps a demonic entity that feeds on human life, or even human fear. It uses our own compassion as a weapon, turning our best instincts into a fatal trap. Nearing the end, these last two are the most feared. Number 2. The Pocong that leaps between houses. Indonesia's most iconic ghost. Imagine you're driving late at night down a narrow provincial road in Indonesia. The jungle presses in on both sides, a wall of impenetrable black. Your headlights cut a lonely path through the darkness. Suddenly, something long and white lies in the middle of the road, forcing you to slam on the brakes. Is it a log? A person? You peer closer. It's a bundle wrapped tightly in white cloth, tied at the head, neck, and feet. It looks like a human body prepared for burial. This is a Pocong. just become part of its game. The Pocong is the soul of a dead person trapped in its burial shroud. In Islamic tradition, the ties binding the shroud are supposed to be released after 40 days to free the spirit, but sometimes the knots are forgotten. The soul is then stuck, unable to move on, imprisoned within its own decaying body. It cannot walk, so it hops. It cannot use its hands, so it rolls or teleports. Its only goal is to find anyone to untie the knots and set it free. So what do? Do you get out of the car? Do you approach the still, white form lying on the asphalt? Every instinct screams no. You throw the car into reverse, tires screeching, and speed away. But as you glance in your rearview mirror, the bundle is gone. Relief washes over you, but it's short-lived. A heavy thump lands on the roof of your car. It's with you now. This is what makes the Pocong so terrifying. It isn't just a ghost, it's a physical entity. You can hear its approach, the heavy, rhythmic thud, as its bound feet hit the ground. Witnesses say the sound is sickening, a muffled, dense impact that gets closer and closer. The air grows cold, and the smell of decaying earth and stale funeral flowers fills your nostrils. One of the most famous stories comes from a university student named Booty, who was staying late on campus to finish a project. The building was old, and stories of hauntings were common, but he dismissed them as jokes. Around 2 a.m., while walking down a long, empty corridor to the restroom, he heard it, a faint, rhythmic bumping sound from the far end of the hall. He stopped, listening. Thump, thump, thump. He peeked around the corner. Under the flickering fluorescent light, he saw a figure. It was tall and rigid, wrapped head to toe in a dirty, stained white shroud. Its face, what little was visible, was gray and gaunt, with dark, empty sockets where its eyes should be. It was hopping toward him, slowly, methodically. Booty didn't scream. He couldn't. He was paralyzed with fear. The streetlights outside the window flickered with every jump, casting the corridor in a strobe of light and shadow. He ran. He burst into his study room, slamming the door and locking it, his heart pounding in his chest. He pressed his back against the door, listening. The thumping stopped. Silence. For a full minute, there was nothing. Maybe it was gone. Maybe he imagined it. But the final thump came from inside his living room. It had teleported. It was standing in the corner of the room, its head tilted, a silent plea in its vacant gaze. It wanted him to untie the knots. This is the Pocong's curse. To free it is to unleash an unknown entity. To refuse is to be haunted by it until you go mad. Another chilling account tells of a family who had just moved into a new home. Night after night, they would hear a heavy object being dragged across their roof. Then came the thumps against their bedroom window. When the father finally gathered the courage to look, he saw it. A Pocong, its shrouded body pressed against the glass, its featureless face just inches from his own. It wasn't trying to get in. It was just watching. Every night, it would return, a constant, silent sentinel of death outside their window. They moved out within a week. The Pocong doesn't just want to scare you. It needs you. It's a desperate soul, bound by earthly ties, its eternal rest held hostage by a simple knot. But its appearance is so horrifying, its presence so viscerally wrong, that no one can bear to help. It leaps from rooftops, teleports mountains and lies in wait on dark roads, forever seeking a release it will likely never find. And finally, Indonesia's most terrifying legend. Number 1. Kuntilanak, the woman who calls your name, the spirit everyone fears. Imagine walking down a quiet, moonlit lane in rural Indonesia. The air is thick with the scent of frangipani flowers, a sweet, almost cloying perfume that hangs heavy in the humid night. Suddenly, you hear a baby crying. It's faint at first, a distant, sorrowful whimper that seems to come from nowhere at once. A chill, completely unrelated to the night air, crawls up your spine. Every local knows what that sound means. Don't look for the source, turn around and run, because if you hear a baby cry in the dead of night, she is near. But what if the crying stops, and instead you hear the sound of a woman laughing? A soft, almost musical giggle that gets closer and closer. That's when the true terror begins. That's when you know the Kuntilanak has found you. The Kuntilanak is arguably the most infamous and feared specter in Indonesian and Malaysian folklore. She is the ghost of a woman who died during childbirth, her spirit forever bound to the earth, consumed by a grief that has twisted into a thirst for vengeance. She appears as a beautiful woman with long, dark hair that cascades down her back, obscuring her face. She wears a long, flowing white dress, often stained with blood. Her skin is unnaturally pale, like a porcelain doll left out in the rain. But it's her feet you should look for, or rather, the lack of them touching the ground. The Kuntilanak floats, an ethereal nightmare gliding through the air. One of the most terrifying tales tells of a young man named Budi, who was driving home late one evening on a notoriously lonely stretch of road flanked by dense rubber trees. His car's headlights cut a weak path through the oppressive darkness. He saw a figure on the side of the road, a woman in a white dress, seemingly trying to flag him down. Being a kind person, he slowed his car, rolling down the window to ask if she needed help. She didn't speak. She just pointed a long, slender finger down the road ahead. Budi, feeling uneasy, decided it was best to just keep driving. As he accelerated, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The woman was gone. He let out a sigh of relief, thinking he had imagined it. But then a soft giggle echoed from his back seat. He froze, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't dare turn around. He just stared at the road ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the giggling growing louder, more manic, right behind his ear. What gives the Kuntilanak her most chilling power is her voice. She can mimic the voice of a loved one, a mother, a wife, a sister. She calls your name from the darkness, a soft, breathy, and echoing whisper that pulls you toward her. A boy heard his mother calling him from the backyard late at night, but something in the voice felt wrong. It was laced with a strange, hollow echo. He peeked outside and saw a woman in a white dress, hair covering her face, her feet not touching the ground. She called his name again, but this time her voice came from behind him, inside the house, yet she was still outside the window. When he turned around, she was inches from him, smiling with needle-like teeth. Her connection to frangipani and jasmine flowers is a key part of her legend. If you smell the sweet fragrance of these flowers, it means she is nearby. If the scent is faint, she is far away. But if the scent is overpowering, so strong it makes your head swim, she is right behind you. Another chilling sign is the sound of a chick or anak ayam. A single, lonely peeping sound is a harbinger of her presence. The legend says she preys on pregnant women and young children, driven by a spectral jealousy for the life she lost. But she is also known to target men, luring them to their doom with her beauty before revealing her true, horrific form. It's said she uses her long, sharp fingernails to disembowel her victims, feasting on their organs. The only way to defeat a Kuntilanak, according to the lore, is to drive a sharp nail into the hole at the nape of her neck, the sundal bolong. If you succeed, she will transform back into a beautiful, mortal woman and become a loyal wife until the day the nail is removed. But who would be brave enough to get that close? And that concludes our top 10 Indonesian horror stories. Which one kept you up tonight?